Hi, and welcome to this week's video. In this video, we swapped the 7S26 movement in a Seiko SKX for a new Seiko TMI NH36 movement. I will tell you what you need to do that, I will tell you how to do that, and I will tell you some tips and tricks I picked up while doing it. This Seiko SKX 007 belongs to a very good friend of mine. He bought it, I believe, in 2017, and it has been pretty much his everyday watch since. The watch stopped working properly some time ago, and you can see that here. Something is messed up in the movement, and we can't figure out quite what it is. It's not magnetized, I tried to fix that, and I also failed to service it. So we need a different solution. If this watch would be sent to Seiko, what they would most likely do is just swap the old 7S26 movement for a new one, simply because fixing the current movement would not be cost effective to them. So we decided to do it ourselves, but not with a 7S26, but with the new NH36 movement. This also upgrades the functionality of the watch, because the new movement comes with a hacking second and hand winding, which the 7S26 did not have. Both of those features make the watch feel more contemporary and practical. Here's a list of things and extra tools you need to do the job. First of all, of course, you need a new movement. You need a new crown and stem, and that is because the NH36 crown and stem are a single unit and cannot be fit or exchanged to the new movement. You don't need the new crown tube though. I also recommend you to use a Dremel tool with a cutting disc to cut down the new stem. If you don't have that, you can also use a wire cutter and a file. And for the last tool, you need a very flat and sharp screwdriver, and I will show you where you need that. So how do you actually do it? First, I want to apologize that I don't have a video for every single step in this process. The reason is I did not plan to make a video about this modification. I tried to match my instructions with video and photographs wherever possible. After removing the dial and hands from the old movement, first you have to remove the C-clip from the old movement. Use a very sharp screwdriver or blade for that job. To lift it up, use the round side of the clip and not one of these ends. This might, for one, send it flying and you searching all over the floor for it, but it also might bend the C-clip, which means that you will not be able to use it again. Then, after you have taken off the C-clip, remove the Weekday disc and place both of them on a piece of paper so that you don't forget about them. I also draw circles around them to remind myself that there was actually a part on this piece of paper. Make sure to remove the little white plastic wheel also and place it on the paper too, because this little wheel will fall out when you handle the movement. Now remove the plastic ring around the movement and be very careful not to break it. This is the movement ring that makes the movement fit to the case of the watch. This ring on the 7S26 should be black and it is lodged in place right at where the two holes for the dials are. These are on opposite positions on the ring. You can start removing it on those points because that is where the ring is fixed to the movement. It's best to do this carefully with your hands, ideally wearing gloves. Make sure to watch where you apply pressure on the movement so that you don't actually damage the movement or balance, especially the balance wheel. Now you can do the same with the NH36 movement. Remove the Weekday disc and the movement ring in the same way, and watch out again for that little plastic wheel. My recommendation is to place these parts on a separate piece of paper so that you don't accidentally interchange them with the 7S26 parts. For the reassembly, put the black movement ring from the 7S26 on the new NH36 and make sure that the cutout on the movement ring fits the correct place on the movement. Then put the Weekday disc from the 7S26 on the NH36 and don't forget to install the little white wheel back on the movement before fitting the disc. The C-clip can now be placed on the movement and be pressed in place carefully with a pair of tweezers. It seems best to do that from the top and not from the side, since the clip could rotate around the hour tube and go flying, leaving you on the ground searching for it once again. If everything is in place and the C-clip lies flat on the disc and is not bent, install the dial for the first check. You can check the function by putting the temporary crown in and try setting the weekday to make sure everything is working correctly. You can check the alignment of the date and day visually at the window on the dial. Now is your chance to fix issues. Figuring out you have an issue after the hands are fit and the movement is cased up is just double the work. All that is left to do now is to fit the hands and cut the crown stem to size. Don't forget to advance to where day and date switch over at night and to match them with the hands at 12 o'clock so that your watch don't randomly changes date and day during the day. You can now case up the watch, but keep the back open because chances are you have to adjust the length of the new crown stem multiple times, and therefore you will need to keep access to the movement. Cutting the stem to length should be approached slowly and in small steps, and I recommend using a Dremel tool with a cutting disc instead of wire cutters and files. This also leaves you with a clean thread and no problems when screwing on the crown. If the crown fits perfectly to the movement, test everything a couple of times and then close the case back, and there you have it. Your old SKX with a new NH36 movement and all the new features that come with it. A couple of tricks I picked up along the way and that I want to pass on is, first of all, to use two small little pieces of paper to place the separate parts so that you don't actually and accidentally interchange them, because the whole point is fitting the right date disc on the new movement. I also found it much more easy to use a Dremel tool with the cutting disc instead of a wire cutter and file. Much more precise, and it's a much cleaner work. It leaves you with a much better result, and you are not as likely to accidentally cut the stem to the wrong length or too much, which would then mean that you would have to buy a new one. When removing the C-clip, my recommendation is to use a very flat and sharp screwdriver and apply pressure from the round part of the C-clip. If you have a small blade and a very sharp blade, you can also use that. When putting the watch back together, and especially putting the date disc or the day disc back on the movement, it's best to put on the movement ring first so that you have an extra layer of protection while working on the movement. Thank you for watching this week's video. I hope it was helpful and gives you a step-by-step to upgrade your own watch. And I see you next week.